So my name is Brad McBride. I drive this 63 Fastback. So in Thanksgiving of 2015, I was actually going to go buy another GTI. My wife and I wanted to build another one, just kind of flip it, make a little money. So on the way back, I remember this guy had a Fastback, so I just gave him a call. I had my trailer and everything, so I'm interested in that Fastback you have. And he said, well, I'm not going to sell it. And as I'm coming on the way home, he says, you know what, just come on by here and take a look at it and we'll see what happens. I pull in and he says, it's back there in the barn. There's this orange Fastback, of course it's not orange now, but there's an orange Fastback sitting back there. And all I cared about was the roof straight and with the quarter fins straight, because I knew everything else I could take care of. Went back there, roof straight, quarter fins straight. It had been hit down the side on a guardrail. I knew I could hammer and dolly it out smooth. That was in 2015 that we purchased this car in a barn and turned it into what you see now. It started out as a 1970. We modified it, front end and the tail lights. I just like the sleeker look of the 63. All right, so the power plant in the 63 Fastback is the 2.8 liter VR6, which is commonly found in your Volkswagen Jettas, Volkswagen Golfs, and the like 95 to 2001 era is the one we're using. And we bored it out to a 3.0. It's getting boost from a BorgWarner Airworks 7687 Turbo, which took me a while to figure out how to get it in the car because we're just tight on space. We're hoping to be launched around 45 pounds off the start line and getting to 60 pounds boost by the time we get to the finish line. It's got a Power Glide transmission behind it, which is a GM product. It's most commonly found in drag racing, from dragsters to cars to about any vehicle that's out on a drag strip. Power Glide is the transmission that's always been felt as the strongest and most durable. And then that is hooked to a 9-inch Ford custom rear end housing that we built with Ford 9-inch gears in it. And that is just one of the beefiest rear ends that you can get, and it's also commonly found in drag racing. So we try to do everything we could to make it as strong and durable as possible. And of course the VR6 power plant is just a good base for that, because you can get a lot of power out of it. All right, so I'm just going to walk through how we start this thing up. It's not really nothing crazy, but so we're going to fire it up and let you see. So right here's my master cutoff switch. I pull this on. I turn my ignition on. It lets me know that this button here is actually for oil. I have an oil supply right here in this canister. I flip this switch on, it pushes oil in the motor, so it's pre-lubed before I ever crank the car. And then, because it's a mechanical fuel pump, I don't have an electrical pump. It's just a matter of starting. So as I've got it running, I'm watching, I want to be at 1600 RPM. I want to have good oil pressure, as you saw, around 80. And then I will watch my temperature. I want to launch or be staged, ready to launch around the 100 mark. I don't want it any hotter than that. And then by the end of the run, I'm hoping it's between 130 and 150. 150 is kind of the max where I want it. A lot of people say, you know, you can't run a car that cold, but actually we have an oil temp and we heat it during the time we are not on the track. So I've always got it plugged in. And my oil temp is already up to 180 degrees before I ever get to the starting line and crank the car. So I actually have heat in the motor, but the head and the block and all that is actually cooler. Keep that cold temperature, which allows me to keep cold intake temperatures. It keeps the motor running cooler and allows me to have more performance. I get to the start line, I put it in neutral, of course, pull it back down into high gear. For me, I don't have a bump box like you see a lot of cars have on TV. I don't like the aggravation of you're flickering that bulb and you're bouncing out. So what I do is I leave it in high gear. I press this button again, which is the trans brake. And now I'm stalling the car up with the throttle to 4,500 RPM. And once I reach 4,500 RPM, I'm actually already creating boost. And then I will begin to bump in to stage, still holding this button. When I get staged, you pull it in the low and that locks the transmission between neutral and reverse. And that allows me to, I can floor it or whatever I want to do, but I try to get up to 6,300 RPM, hopefully around 45 pounds of boost. When the light flashes to turn green, I let go of the button and I'm going. And then at 7,200 RPM, I will bump it into second gear manually. And then about a second later, I'm going through the finish line. I'll reach up and I will pull this lever and pull the chutes, and then I will kill the ignition. And that all happens in less than a minute. That whole series takes less than a minute. The run from let go on this button to shifting to pulling the chute should be around 5 seconds or less. All right, so here at the shop, you know, I've been fortunate enough to learn how to make a lot of stuff. So basically everything on this car we've had to make because there's no one else really running this kind of setup. From the intake to the motor plates to, you know, brackets on the car. But the things we changed this year is we've gone to injector dynamic 2600cc injectors, and they're for 100% methanol. And we've also went to this mechanical fuel pump for methanol. The methanol also has allowed me to delete the intercooler, it's allowed me to delete the coolant system. And with those few things taken off the car and then taking the weight off to balance the car, I was able to remove around 235, 240 pounds off the car over the winter just from those modifications. And an 1/8 mile, every 100 pounds is a 1/10 of a second. So even if I stay at the horsepower it's been making over the past couple of years, I can still improve by 2/10 of a second or better in a 1/4 mile. And that's just off the weight reduction alone. If you look right here, I got a 16-volt alternator. We fabricated this bracket in-house. So we're going 16 volts. That allows us to have better production of fuel through the injectors. It also allows anything that's electrical in the car to be able to work better than it would on 12 volts. So it's more of a security thing. An example is when you're spinning over the car with a 12-volt battery, this mechanical pump would produce maybe 5 to 6 pounds of fuel pressure just spinning it over. But with the 16 volt, I'm able to spin it up to 30 pounds PSI before I ever hit the ignition switch. So that allows that fuel to be right there in the system, so I get more responsive on my starts. And it's not sitting there spinning and wearing a starter out all the time. So we made a lot of changes over the winter, and with the things that are going on in the world right now, racing has been cut short, but we're actually getting ready to go to the track and just do some test hits and see what the car will actually do and see what kind of improvements have been made with the things we've changed on the car. We worked hard over the winter to increase the durability of the car and also the performance, so we're anxious to see what that's going to look like. So first pass, I went up there and checked the track. Pretty much the track just wasn't there. It wasn't very sticky at all. So just instantly went into tire spin, lifted, pedaled several times, just all over the track, squirrely, and had to abort the run because it's getting close to the center line. Come back and just detuned the car. It's the weakest tune I've ever put in the car. I was at like 5% wastegate. Like I was trying to be hitting like 8 pounds boost. I was trying to be really low on boost. Went out about 20 feet, spun the tires, I pedaled it, got the hook back up, and then went ahead and made a full pass. It ran 6.000 at 130. And that's the weakest tune I can put in it. Just trying to get it to go down the track with the conditions that the track's in today. So on the last pass, we're not sure what happened. It puked a little bit of oil. I think it's coming off the valve cover on the overflow where it goes into a puke tank. I believe it just sprayed in that fitting and it hosed down the exhaust. When I made the turn, I thought it could be on fire, but it was just the oil burning on top of the exhaust. And for some reason, the safety officials didn't feel the need to come check me out, even though it was smoking real bad. So I yanked the front end off and looked at it, and I didn't see any flames, so I figured we was okay, but I was a little worried there for a second. So a lot of people want to know, again, what the dyno sheets show, and we don't dyno it. So the next question is, if you don't dyno it, how do you tune it? Well, basically, when you do a full pull down the drag strip, you're doing the same thing as you would on a dyno. You're still doing that pull. So what we do is we read the data when we get back, just like you would on a dyno, or if somebody's tuning your car, you know, they're looking at logs on the ECU through their laptop. We do the same thing here. I'll plug the car up to the laptop, download the run, take it inside, and I'll just analyze it. All right, it's doing this here, I need to tweak it here, that type of thing. So it's basically the same thing you're doing on a dyno, but I'm doing it on the track. We were using junkyard motors. We were still running like 5 teens and an 8th at 135, 140 mile an hour. But we kept hurting the #1 rod bearing. And you can tell that's not supposed to be that way. So what we realized is the acceleration of the car in 60 feet was allowing the oil pressure to drop. Because in a VR6, you know, this engine's turned what we would consider the right way in drag racing or the wrong way in a Volkswagen. But the oil is actually pumping to the front of the engine to #1, but the acceleration, the gravity from acceleration is pushing oil backwards. So we had to resolve that problem, and what we did is we went and rerouted the oil supply to #1 and to the head, and that helped eliminate the problem. Along with changing our motor oil, we went to a driven racing motor oil, which helps us with the viscosity to keep oil in these bearings so they don't blacken and lock up. The #2 issue we had, which is all VR6s have the problem of when you put boost, is #1 cylinder is really, really tight. This is the coolant area, and this is the only little bit of meat you have for a gasket between #1 and your coolant system. So when you're making a lot of boost, that's your weak point. So what we started doing is we started making our own gaskets, making them tighter. And we also O-ring the block, and you can see right here where there's an O-ring groove in this gasket. And so we've O-ringed the block, and now we have a receiver groove in the head, so that gasket can actually be pushed up in the head, and it locks everything in place, and it eliminates leakage like this. And again, we poured the block, so there's no longer any coolant here that can be pushed out. It's poured solid. It's basically concrete, but it's a block compound that we put in the block to make it tight. It also makes it stronger. And those are the two main things that we've had problems with this car. And again, that all started when we really started trying to push it off the start line and get that ET down. So we're hoping with the changes we've made that we've resolved these issues, and it'll allow us just to continue to increase the horsepower rating of the engine so we can get quicker and quicker. All right, so when I built this car, it actually started with a pile of tubing like you see behind me. And I built it to NHRA specs, so it would be tech to a safety standard, so I knew I'd be safe. That was the main thing. You know, I didn't want to just throw something together that I might could get hurt in. So we built this chassis. It's a tube chassis. It actually certified for 6.0, which means I can go 6.0 seconds in a quarter mile, which would be crazy in this car. It'll never go that fast, but at least I know I'm safe to that point. We built the chassis, we painted it blue, of course, but in drag racing, I'm always taking the front end off, you're taking parts off. I didn't want a real shiny show car finish, per se, because I knew if it got scratched, I'd get upset, or you know, I'd always be being particular about it. So I always wanted to do a patina job, and I wanted to do a patina that looked legit. So we painted this car blue and patinaed it out. I did the rust on it, everything, because I wanted it to look natural. And a lot of people always ask, when are you gonna paint it? Well, I did. But I also did all these signs you see inside. With the exception of the license plates you see, the license plates are vinyl decal. I was gonna use real license plates, but it's right by my leg and I didn't feel comfortable with that. But all the signage you see in here is hand painted. You know, the floor plan's aluminum, the shell sign on the left side steel because you're required to have steel under your feet. Each license plate has history. You know, there's Georgia because there's SOA. We went to SOA in Georgia. Everything on here has a story, so that's why that stuff's in there. The NGK signs on the firewall for NGK spark plugs, that's what we run, so we just wanted to throw that on there, and then we just pinstripe push off, because you got to have that for the tech officials to know how to cut the car off if you get in an accident. And to be honest with you, I never knew that this car would lead into my occupation. Now I build race cars and I build signs. You know, I have signs in the car, but I wasn't doing signs when I built the car, so it's kind of neat how all that comes to play and comes together. So at the track, we always get asked how much horsepower does it make, and the truth is we've never had it on a dyno. I can give you numbers based off of ET of what it should be, based off the weight of the car and the ETs it runs and the mile power it runs. We can do calculations to figure out what the horsepower is. So in the past few years, I've just had it a base tune of around 850 to 900 horsepower, and we've run low 5 seconds. We actually set the record for the stock VR6 in 8th mile at 5.23 seconds at 132 mile an hour. That was with a dead cylinder and a fouled spark plug in the other cylinder. So I was basically running, we'll just say 4.5 cylinders on this VR6. We know we've gone faster, but we don't have the timesheets to prove that, because a lot of races we go to are no time events and we don't get these time slips, but we go by our data on the computer. So this is a 2001 Volkswagen Golf GTI that my wife and I bought out of Maryland. And then she and I just started this project of tearing it apart and just trying to make a drag car out of it, something that she could play with, but we could work on together. So the engine bay is, you know, we tuck all the wiring and everything, but we basically was doing it for accessibility to be able to work on it. And it just turned out really nice. So when we got the vehicle done, I said, well, maybe we should show it some before we start racing and getting it scratched up and stuff. But again, that was in 2012, 2013. And now she drives it pretty much on a regular basis. We enjoy it. It's fun to get out and just cruise around in. You know, she goes to the grocery store in it or whatever. We've also got harnesses in the back. We work with teenagers, so we like to take them for a ride if they want to, and just show them how fun cars can be and get them interested in that. But the carbon fiber work we did here, we made the console, and pretty much everything on the car we've done ourselves, just like the Type 3 that we were looking at. It's just a blast to drive. The exhaust in the back's custom, even down to the tail light that swings open to fuel the gas in it. So a lot of little things you have to look for, but this is her ride. Thanks for visiting our shop here at Weylons Paint and Custom and BW Motorsports. We've been to the track, but we haven't left here yet. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out Facebook BW Motorsports and Instagram as well, and also Weylons Paint and Custom. Thanks.